Joining us in the studio is Akintunde Sawyerr, the Managing Director, Nigerian Education Loan Fund, NELFUND. Thank you so much for joining us. We've just seen that report and just the amazing things that the fund is doing, giving that access to education. But I just wanted to ask you, just to educate Nigerians, how does NELFUND operate on a day-to-day basis? How do you ensure that in a vast country like Nigeria, this is really targeted to those, the most vulnerable, those who are underserved in Nigeria?
Okay, so that's a really great question, and I think it speaks to the exact reason why NELFUND was set up. So the President, in his wisdom, sent the original bill back to the National Assembly to have it repealed and reenacted. And essentially it was in that repeal and the new bill itself that the targeting of indigent students or people who perhaps cannot afford tertiary education was addressed. So things like the requirement for a guarantor were removed, the cap on the actual earnings of a family, which was at ₦500,000 a year, was removed. So to your question about how we run NELFUND day to day, essentially we have a portal. That portal is approached by those who feel they need a loan or may need one in the future. They're able to access it, and as long as they meet the criteria set out there, so they have to be Nigerians, they have to have accessed tertiary education using JAMB, they have to have a matriculation number if they're already in the institution, or an admission number if they're about to access it. That portal allows them to apply effectively without meeting anybody. The information comes through to us, we look at it. If it meets the criteria that we have set, we verify, and then we approve, and then what happens next is that we disperse.
It does sound like a seamless process, and many Nigerians could be skeptical sometimes because of trust deficit. They'll say to you, man must know man to get somewhere. So now you get this application and you look through them. You did mention in that report that 328,000 have applied. Most of them would get the loan. Those were your words.
Yes.
It does suggest that not everybody that applies would get the loan. So is there a cap to borrowing? Is there a priority giving? And how much really can a student borrow? And what's that transparency, fair process? Since it still gets to you to go through, how do you ensure that it is transparent, it is free, and it is fair to Nigerians?
Sure, no, absolutely. So to my comment about most of them will get the loan, you know, we have some very clear criteria as to who might be able to apply. So you have to be Nigerian, as I said. You have to be attending a publicly owned tertiary institution, a university, a polytechnic, or a college of education. Most of the people who attend these institutions clearly have challenges in terms of their ability to pay fees, which is why you don't find them in the private sector. What we do is we assess, based on the information that they've given us, whether they're eligible or not. So I'll give you some examples. What we do is that we preload the information that we collect from all institutions, the ones that I've described. We preload it into our system. That information is cross-checked when the student approaches the portal and provides us with some of the data. So their JAM number I spoke to earlier, their name, their date of birth, their matriculation number. If that matches with what we have in our system, we approve. They're also required to upload certain pieces of information like their identity, like their admission letter, for example. If all that checks out and they've made no errors in terms of the information they provide us with, they will most likely get the loan.
All right. Yeah. You're going to finish on that.
Yeah, in terms of fairness and equity,
yes,
what we try to do is make sure that we're completely dispassionate when we're assessing these loans. It's not subjective at all. We look to see where they are, we look to understand what their circumstances might be, and as long as they've been truthful in the application, we will generally approve it.
So is there a cap to borrowing? Because it does sound like a lot of money. Is there a cap to the amounts a student can get?
The simple answer to that is yes, but it's not a uniform cap. So if, you know, every course, every institution will attract a different fee for the course, for the institution. So if you're studying medicine, for example, you're unlikely to be paying the same amount of money as you would be if you were studying something like engineering, perhaps. And the institutions vary in their fees. There is no cap in the sense that once they apply, we pay 100% of the institutional charge as described to us in the database by the institution. So that's the cap, if you like, 100%. We do provide the opportunity for people to apply for upkeep, stipend, pocket money, so that they've got some cash to be able to pay for data, buy handouts, the sorts of things that you might need if you're a student. That's capped at 20,000 naira per month for a session. In other words, for a 12-month session. As long as they apply for the first loan, they get the second one. If the first one is approved, of course. Yeah. So one is contingent on the other, but that's as far as the cap goes. The absolute cap is on the 20,000 naira per month for 12 months, 240,000 naira a year. The cap on the institutional fees is based on 100% of whatever that fee is, as described to us by the institution and loaded into our database.
Okay, let's talk about repayment, right? Education loans are the lifeline for so many. But some will say the sustainability of that is or hinges on the ability to repay. And you've said that this has the best repayment terms anywhere. Interest-free loans repayment starting 2 years after NYSC. Now, we know that in Nigeria, there's rising unemployment. How realistic can we expect the beneficiaries to repay? Are there any sort of contingency plans in case someone cannot pay after 2 years of NYSC?
Yeah, so, the way this is set up is you only pay if you're earning. So 2 years after NYSC, there is a reporting requirement. We need to know whether you've got a job or you haven't. If you haven't got a job, you don't start making repayments.
Okay.
But what we've also decided to do is that we recognize this issue, this challenge, this gap in terms of finding work. We're looking very closely at how we're going to help students find jobs. And very shortly, you're going to hear about a portal that we're going to launch where we're going to draw jobs into it that are preferential to the loanees so that they can apply for jobs. We're going to draw in government jobs. We're drawing jobs from various private sector organizations so that we're actually presenting these opportunities to people. That does a couple of things. First of all, they have the opportunity to apply for the jobs. Secondly, people get to understand the sort of jobs that are available so that it can focus their minds on the sorts of courses they need to be doing. We're launching this job portal as a sort of educational opportunity for people to see where the vacancies are, so that those coming through understand the sort of courses they should be applying for. We have to provide loans for people to do courses where there's a realistic chance that they can get a job because there's a gap in the job market for that specific course.
Brilliant. And of course, you need the money back so that you're able to help others, so they need to pay. Realistically speaking, Mr. Sawyerr, let's be realistic. Data is still a huge problem in Nigeria.
Yes.
Hey, we don't even know how many we are. We're an estimated population. So how does the government, how do you hope to monitor repayment plan to ensure that defaulters are not overlooked?
Okay, so in terms of repayment, I think one of the benefits that we're going to find from doing this sort of access to education opportunity is that the entire country, if you uplift the people in terms of their education, you're likely to get more successful entrepreneurs. You're likely to get more jobs created because people are being more creative and are adding more value. You're likely to reduce the propensity for people to go and look for staff from other countries, whether it's Togo or India. We want to give Nigerian jobs to Nigerians. But if people are just studying courses that are not fit for where we are in our economy and are sort of running a cliche type, I'm just going to become an X because my father or mother was an X. We've got to move away from that. The world is changing. In terms of how realistic it is for people to pay back, we believe that if we uplift education in general, there'll be more wealth created.
Yeah, I get that. My question is, so you've given out this loan.
Yes.
How do you know who is owing you? Because data is a problem. So for instance, in school, you do have their data, their matric number, you can monitor, Mr. A, Mr. Z, and all of that. Now they have graduated and into the job market, or maybe jackpot, or somewhere, or something. How do you ensure that people who have benefited from this scheme are repaying back the loans? That's what I'm asking.
Oh, I
really.
see.
In terms
I
of
see.
data
Yes.
and monitoring repayment,
Yes.
is
Okay.
there a mechanism in place?
Okay, so we're putting a mechanism in place where, so in terms of repayment, first of all, I should say, the obligation to make the repayments is upon the employer. So it is the employer that needs to go to a database to check whether an individual has a loan or not. Once they've confirmed that, then there is a legal obligation on the employer to deduct 10% of the income that they're paying to that person and remit it to the fund. So there's no question of criminalizing or going after the people who actually borrowed the funds. But the employer who's benefiting from the added value that that individual is bringing into their organization is obliged to make those deductions. There's only one exception in that case, where a person is employing themselves. So when they're self-employed, they would have to make that declaration, they would have to make that remittance. But to your point, data is a struggle in Nigeria and in many parts of the world, by the way. However, our entire system is data-driven. We don't meet people. They provide data. We API into JAMB. We API into NIMSI for their NIN. We API and will be APIing into the institutions themselves. So actually, we can track people. You know, everybody should have a NIN. If they don't have a NIN, they can't access our system. And we keep all of the data. The individuals provide us with a profile as well when they're registering. And that profile gives us a lot of information about them. We know where they are, or we can at least track them. But invariably, as time goes on, you'll need your NIN to renew something or the other. But as time goes on, we'll use this data very effectively. And remember, we're becoming a more credit-driven society, and credit scoring will begin to come into play. So all of that is there. We are data-focused, data-driven. We'll do everything using data from day one.
So nobody thinks this is just national cake, you can eat it and go and run away with the money?
Well, you know, everywhere in the world you will find people in Britain, in the US, who think, you know, something is national cake. But I can tell you, in the last few weeks, I've had 3 people who took loans in the 70s return bankers' checks to us, managers' checks to us, to say, I took a loan for 750 naira in the 70s. I'm now a senior lawyer, and they've given us nearly 3 million naira back for that loan.
Okay.
So not everybody is bad here.
Great, great. Of course, not everybody's bad. Thank you for the work you do. We'll be monitoring NELFUND to see its progress.
Thank you.
you.
Stay with us.
Indeed.